Okay, I'm bringing you back here now. What are some of the words that popped up? What else? What popped up for you guys? The X-Files. Hold on. For our people at home, we don't want to.
Honesty.
What else? Anyone else? There were lots of conversations.
Friendship.
What else for trust?
Credibility.
Back here? Come on.
Make solution.
Make solution and decisions. All right, so trust can mean a lot of different things, but it's something. Okay, so I'm going to try and bring this back here. Okay, so trust can mean a lot of different things, but this is an area that's really at great risk right now with our world changing so rapidly and all the things we've already discussed, add on the politics, add on culture changes, right? So we've got a lot of change going on, and that puts our trust at risk. So in that time, what we're going to do in this session is talk about how we rebuild that trust or strengthen that trust. Because it was brought up earlier, misinformation, disinformation, how to counter it. But one key way of countering it is to completely flip. If we just keep chasing every piece of misinformation online, we're going to lose the battle. So how do we start on the opposite side in that trust building? So joining me today, we've got a couple of virtual people, and we've got a couple in person here too. So we're going to bring up the virtual friend. Okay, while we're bringing up our virtual friends, we are going to start with Sarah Ann Comel. She is joining us as a special advisor to the president of the University Côte d'Azur, and she's a director in International European Operations. We've also got David Ferranda. He is a research director at CNRS, working on climate dynamics and extreme weather events, also leading author of this upcoming IPCC cycle. So if you want insider information, right here. And he coordinates with Climameter, who does the rapid attribution events. And someone had already asked me yesterday if there's going to be an event on this current heat wave, so we can get into that. All right, joining us remotely, we have, I see Ayana's here, Ayana Masechkova. She is a program officer at UN Climate Change, where she focuses on strategic communication. Previously served as the head of communication and digital for the COP in Glasgow 26 for the presidency. And she's also served roles for the UK Department of Environment and Parliament. And we have, I think, one more joining us, Manuel. Do we have Manuel? Okay, we'll see if we have Manuel, but there he is. Okay, so we've got Manuel joining us today too. Manuel, your bio is way too long to read because you've done so many amazing things, so everyone can access it in their book, and I'm gonna pull out some of the highlights here. We have global leader in climate energy, currently at WWF, also interim chair at IUCN for the Climate Crisis Commission. He previously served as Minister of Environment of Peru, also president of COP20, and executive director of the Peruvian Society for Environmental Law. And seriously, check out his bio. There's a whole lot of good stuff in there. So to get started today, we were going to go to each person just a minute or two of what brought you to this conversation. What in this theme really popped up for you when you were preparing? So we'll start with you, Sarah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, now it's working. Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the Mary Foundation for bringing me here and the Foro Internacional that accepted for me to come here. I would say that before anything, for us, one of the main challenges is actually getting out of our comfort zone and coming to this kind of meeting to meet with colleagues with whom we don't often actually interact as institutions and as a representative from universities. So really thank you for that. I've already learned quite a lot, including in the narrative that we show at the level of the universities. What brought me to the topic of trust is actually because we hear a lot about this topic of lacking trust or a failure of trust. But when we look at the literature, we actually see that people still trust science, still trust scientists. And here I would like to acknowledge a couple of papers, but I only cite one, which has been published recently and has covered actually a huge survey throughout 68 countries on how people actually trust science. So taking into consideration that in the literature, we see that citizens trust scientists and trust science, why in the public debate do we hear a lot about this fragility in trust in science and how it is actually impacting the way we communicate, the way the scientific facts resonates among society, and bringing that to the conversation. This is really why I started to get interested in that conversation.
Thank you. All right, Davide.
So first of all, good afternoon, and thanks a lot for the organizer and Bernadette also for the preparation of this roundtable. It's a pleasure to be back in Italy from time to time. So for me, I start to do science communication and connect to the media thanks to this connection that is quite natural between extreme event attribution and the fact that they have to be timely communicated to the general public. I think
I'm going to
that
pause for 1 second because most people know extreme event attribution.
yes,
But
yeah.
I want if you could explain what that
Yeah,
is
sure.
so everyone understands.
So when there is an extreme weather event coming in, for example, now we're living this heat wave with temperatures that are expected, especially in France, where I will go back tomorrow, to exceed the 40 degrees Celsius in most of the country for several days in a row. So that's the kind of event where we want to know what's the role of climate change and of greenhouse gases emissions in enhancing the temperature and also the frequencies and the duration of this kind of events. So there is an entire science that do answer this question. It's the attribution science. And within this field of science, I've developed with some colleagues a rapid tool that is very much meteorological related. In fact, the idea is that these extreme events are linked to circulation, weather patterns that can be then tracked through the archives of ECMWF, for example, or GFS, so the weather forecast of the past. And so we can see how a cyclone or an anticyclone that is happening now is different with respect to those that happened in the past. And therefore end up with statements, for example, such as the heat wave in May in France was 2 to 3 degrees warmer because of climate change, and also have a map that shows these changes on the domain that we use for the analysis. And so these immediately, since we can do this using the weather forecast, we can have the results immediately now for what's going on now, and also maybe for what will happen next week. It depends on how much we trust the weather forecast. So normally we do exactly the same day that the event unfold. And this, of course, means that we produce these results for the communication, and therefore that we can communicate immediately this number to the press. But maybe we'll come back to this later. But about trust, what I'm seeing now is that, in fact, there are things that are destroying this trust. There are different things for me. One, of course, is the political will, or the will from this big group that hold the fossil fuels, and that they want absolutely not to, that these questions of the climate change is, that it should be a human right to have so it's not a marketplace, it's a human right to have a climate stable. It's like food, water, medicines, these are human rights. Instead, some people want to make a market out of it, and I think that's the problem. When you want to make a market, either to sell products that are related to climate change or continue to sell fossil fuels, in where you are destroying trust and substitute a market and put something else there. And there, if it becomes a market, it's not anymore a right. And people say, well, what the scientists are doing here, are they selling products or are they doing science for the human beings? And so my path into this communication is like, let's put back the human beings where they are and their rights.
Thank you. All right, let's bring in our folks online here. We've got Ayana. What is it that brings you to this discussion and gets you thinking about trust?
Thanks, Bernadette, and it's a pleasure to join you and be a part of the panel. I'm really sorry I can't be there in person in Rome. We just wrapped up 2 weeks of climate negotiations here in Bonn, actually, finishing late yesterday evening, but it's great to be a part of this and share a little bit about what you and climate change has been working on. But I guess to your question, a focus for myself and for my colleagues at UN Climate Change is essentially supporting the intergovernmental climate process, including the annual climate negotiations that you might have heard of, COPs, where countries come together to agree and deliver climate action, but also all the bits in the process that lead up to that, including these negotiations we just had in Bonn the last 2 weeks. And in communications, that often means explaining very complex sort of technical policy decisions, science, to audiences that aren't following this every day, but are looking to us to see what we're doing on this. And increasingly that job is getting harder because of the information environment we find ourselves in. And we're looking more and more at joining forces with other organizations and the wider UN system to tackle this more collectively. So I guess that's why I'm here too, because, for example, the people on this panel and also everyone in this room, we want to work with you as well. And I think it's essential that we work more closely together. I mean, just looking at just this year, the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report identified mis and disinformation as the second most severe short-term global risk. And that was right behind environment-related risks. So the threat is real and is increasingly recognized. And, you know, climate information is being distorted. And we heard a really nice overview just before this panel. But yeah, that has massive consequences for public trust. And yeah, we're looking to build more coalitions to do that work better together.
Thank you. And thanks for powering through. We know those meetings are long, so thank you. And now, Manuel, welcome to the conversation. And what is it that gets you going when it comes to trust and brings you to this conversation?
Oh, thank you. Look, let me start with this strong statement. Science must not feel guilty of anything. I think that science is doing great things, have done great things, have supported the process to evolve, and I think that we have to continue insisting on that. And why I am saying this, because when it is about science and misinformation, we are really combining or trying to balance four realities. And that is the complexity of dealing with misinformation. So it is science and how science it is communicating, it is transmitting its message. Second, it is the current political reality. So we know how complex it is, the current political reality, because it is not only political, but also it is an economic discussion in the sense of it is related to the economy, what is the source of energy, it is about all of those transitions in which there are tensions. So the point is that sometimes misinformation, it is not coming because of science. It is coming because of this political debate, that it is an economic debate, and it is a debate about hegemonies of the world. So that is something that we have to consider. The third one, it is that this debate, it must balance the technological evolution. AI, it is one of those, but also this kind of devices and the way in which we are accessing to information. So we do need to have quick response to current realities that are complex. So how much able we are to do that. And the fourth element, it is citizen engagement. And that is so interesting because the speaker mentioned a phrase that immediately popped up into my mind. Meteorologists must guide society through risks and uncertainty. What it is fully correct, But probably the point it is that sometimes the response of science, it is just more uncertainty. Just think on El Nino. No, we know that we have El Nino now. We know that El Nino it is, or it could be a 3/4 or a global Nino or a coastal Nino, that it is a 1-2, and everybody's asking, but what exactly that it means? And actually, nobody knows, because we know that this kind of meteorological climate events are based mostly on uncertainty, and its potential outcome, it is a bit more of uncertainty. So the point is, how can we deal with this idea of uncertainty when citizens are looking just for facts? They are looking for quick information. They are always looking on this, what it could be that clear response. So those are the kind of things with which we have to deal with. How can we balance these four situations for keeping trust and for keeping the role of science to deal with the current challenges of the planet?
Thank you. So you're already hearing three themes come up. And in our preparation meetings, this is really how it started to shape, is rebuilding trust through three key categories. And everyone here fits into these. It's science. Science really is seeking the truth. It's demanding evidence to solve problems. It's an opportunity for transparency. Through communication, we've already talked about the value of communication and how it is a solution that we need to leverage as a solution. All of us can do it. Collaboration, bringing people together from different networks to learn from each other. As we even had a conversation on the bus coming over here, you were saying, the more I'm around communicators, I'm understanding how to frame some communication. And that's the value of bringing different networks together, because then we can move forward faster together. So there's a couple of really fun topics that came up in our prep, so I'm just going to jump in a little bit here. I'd love to hear from each of you an example, an effective project or program that really did try to build trust. We know there's a lot of challenges out there, but there are also opportunities. So we're going to focus on some of those so we can get people inspired here. So you were talking about a few.
So one specific example, I'm going to start with the third theme on collaboration. One topic that we have tried to develop more and more throughout the years is indeed how we connect with other stakeholders that have other ways, but also other roles on the climate topic. And why did we do that? Is that we believe that bringing university voice as an institution, not only as individual researchers, but also universities taking that responsibility as institution in the public debate with stakeholders that are not coming from academia and from the academic world, is a way of building and contributing to building the trust. And so my specific example would be the work that we have been carrying out with the Mary Foundation, the IPCC, and WMO through the Science for Action Pavilion, where we as universities are contributing to that conversation and to the different panels and even shaping the different panels, while still having one main objective, is to keep science as universal and as neutral and impartial as possible. And that exercise that we have been carrying as institution again, I'm making really a very strong difference between what a university stands out as an institution and the sum up of our research academics and communities that have a different role to play here. But at institution, as universities institution, is how we keep the neutrality of science in the public debate among other stakeholders to keep that trust in science.
And Ayana, you had some great examples on a project that the UN has really, more than a project, it's a theme that UN climate change has been bringing forward starting about a year or 2 years ago. And there was a big push at the last COP. And I'm not seeing you online, but we're going to bring Ayana back up to speak a little bit more on the climate integrity project that you've been doing.
Yes, thank you. I hope you can see me now and you can hear me.
We can hear you.
I can see you. This is good. There I am. So yes, back in November 2024, it was at the G20 summit in Rio. that Brazil, along with the UN and UNESCO, launched this global initiative for information integrity on climate change. So yeah, you know, as the UN, we have processes and things. We have a way of doing things, and this initiative is huge, and it's focused on ensuring that people have access to reliable science-based information to make informed decisions and to really prevent disinformation from weakening climate action. And in just over a year, it really has gained momentum. It's had a number of countries join, 15 countries, and it helps secure information integrity language in a COP decision in the last COP and at the COP30 action agenda. And it's also financing 10 projects around the world to improve information integrity in different regions, and has mobilized that action through civil society partners across those different areas. And more importantly, at the COP last year, there was also, or equally importantly, but there was further momentum in Belém in November last year, where there was a declaration launched on information integrity. And that's had 26 countries and the EU sign up. And so, yeah, that is really great work that's progressing there, and it's only the beginning. And the way that UN climate change is involved is we're part of the steering committee alongside then UNESCO, Brazil, and the UN Department of Global Communications. And our role is linked to mandates, our mandate that is supporting the intergovernmental process, and really is about kind of working to provide strategic advice and also helping make kind of the accurate science-based information more visible and more useful, especially for media as well and for other communicators. So that's how we're involved with the initiative. We just had an event on it here in Bonn a few days ago this week, where we were joined by colleagues from UNESCO and from the UN in New York, and also other country representatives that talked about how they're involved in the initiative. And we also had kind of recipients talking about how this work is helping them on the ground. So yeah, it's very much live and in action, and hoping to be able to share more with you in the future on that too.
Can I ask you, while we're talking about this though, how can people follow along and stay up to date on that?
Yeah, so there's a website. The UN has a whole kind of web page on this, where you have a live tracker. You can see what countries have signed the declaration. You can see where the kind of projects that are being implemented are around the world. And that is sort of live updated. So if you just Google, for example, the Declaration on Information Integrity, you should be able to, we should be the first ones that pop up, or the UN, not UN Climate Change. And you should get more information there.
Great, thank you. So Manuel, how about you? With the range of different projects and programs and collaborations you've been a part of, you've already spoke to the value of science in building that trust. Where have you seen some effective or inspirational projects or programs that people can learn from?
Sure, a lot. So let me say, let's remind this. Science, just in the climate debate, science has provided us with a threshold, with a clear 1.5. Even it was not the Paris Agreement, it was science that finally defined the 1.5 as a clear threshold. But then science also provided us with the transitions. So the energy transition, the industry, the cities, and the deforestation. And why this is important? Because science gave us the pillars to build upon through different initiatives. And remember that when we are talking about transitions, and let's focus on the energy transition, it is the contribution of science to economic processes. Because when it is about energy transition, that means deploying renewables, doubling energy efficiency, transitioning away from fossil fuels, and all of that, science has sent to the economy a clear signal on how the future it must be shaped. And based on that, different kinds of initiatives have been developed. Based on that science, there are a lot of partnerships and coalitions that are developing that transition or are walking that transition. I am board member of the Science Based Target Initiative, and SBTI is working strongly based on science, and by having clearly the 1.5 as a threshold and the net zero as something that we do want to achieve by the half of the century. So the point is, it is not that science will guide us for the whole process. Science will give us pillars that could make us able to develop coalitions. But let me compare what it is happening with climate on what it is happening with biodiversity. Why biodiversity in sense of evolution and traction, it is a bit behind climate? Because on biodiversity, we are still wondering what are those transitions that we have to walk as a way to address biodiversity and species loss. So despite of the effort of the IPBES that has identified what they call the nexus some years ago, there are not still clarity on what are those transitions that the economy could address as an effective way to deal with biodiversity loss. So there are several examples on how much science it could be instrumental to move our action. A climate carbon tracker, I think it is called, it is developing all tracking on how we are based on science. We are measuring NDCs based on science. So again, we have not to blame science, but it is true that we are living in a time of mis and disinformation, and there are some things that it must make science to be more effective in to communicate in the current times. That is true. Let me finish by saying, if we go into the climate debates in 1988, when it was created, the IPCC, it has been mostly science who gave to decision makers all the information, not only to adopted the convention in 92, the Paris Agreement in 2015, among some other good decisions. So we have to keep that good traction in between science and decision makers. It's difficult in the current time because what it is now more difficult, it is the consensus building process because of the current geopolitical process. And Lana, you know that very well, and you have seen it in Bonn. The consensus building process is becoming more difficult. Science is still doing their part, but the decision makers are not necessarily following the science. So what we do need it is to reconnect science with those decision makers.
It's interesting. I had a conversation recently with a different group back in the United States on our National Academies Committee, and people often use that phrase last mile, right? As you so nicely brought up, this true north path of science. Science is showing us the way. Then people talk about the last mile, which comes with the collaboration and the communication, other pieces we've talked about. But there was a reframing in a NOAA report from a couple of years ago that changed it to the critical mile, not the last mile. And I think this is really important framing because if you think of it as last mile, you think of it as being finished. But that critical mile, there's still data and information that can be fed back into how you do the science, how you frame the communication, how you frame the collaborations so that you are connecting with the public. And so I just wanted to bring that forward to everyone too, really thinking through that critical mile, which makes it the full circle of keeping people informed and safe and prepared. And so this, I mean, you started to talk about climate meter earlier. If you want to take this question in a different direction, go for it. But this seems like an opportunity to help understand the opportunities you've seen growing through climate meter to build that trust and connection with the public. You even brought up how in our prep meeting that a media training and how to phrase words and vocabulary around things.
Yeah, I will take in that direction because I was thinking from the discussion that to build trust, we need that the scientific message that we convey is understandable and is also brought by a diverse number of voices, but not just the number. I was a bit like laughing and I was thinking because in one of the last slides, it was the future meteorologist of the previous talk and was a white man with a tie and with yes and no, that's one of the future meteorologists, but there are also women, there are people from all colors, from different way of dressing. So I think it's important that the people that receive the message, they receive this message that we bring, that is a message of science from a diverse number of voices. And that's also why the IPCC works well, because we are people from very different countries, possibly all different religions, background, different colors of skins, whatever. And this mixing is really what makes the message that we give understandable and perhaps clearer then, and also exportable to somewhere else. So the experience that we did, and one of these great experience that we did in France with broad scientific communities, but also the community from communication, the television, the media, was this school that we had in Les Houches, that was the school Art and Science Facing Climate Change. And this school was an opportunity to bring together communicators, people that do media training on climate, philosophers, climate scientists, geographers, and artists, to create new narratives about what we are living now. Because one of the problems also that, like, when we give our messages that are in climate meter, that is like, okay, climate change has intensified, the heat waves by X degrees Celsius, and we all want to be safe and not to be stuck in a train, in a TGV with 50 degrees inside, because you cannot lower the windows anymore because there's supposed to be air conditioning, but the electricity fails. So we don't want to be in this situation. And then what we have to do? We have to stop fossil fuels, right? This is a kind of not even a message. It's not, it's a neutral message now, because it's just science that show that this message is emerging as the only solution. So it's not a politic message anymore, it's a neutral message. But how we convey this? If all the narratives that we see in the cinema, in the television, at the radio, it's all about taking a jet plane, private jet, and flying to the Super Bowl, and then fly again the next day to whatever, or it's not, there is nothing about chasing with bicycle or having a conversation in a train. There are so many conversations in the movie in a car, not an electric car, but maybe a car with gasoline and so on and so forth. So in this school, we were also saying like, well, there is something else that this world based on fossil fuels. There is also another possible world. What we have to make this accessible to the public. And how we do it? Through communication, diverse communication, and through art and science.
And there are some really interesting initiatives growing up around that too. Netflix is leading a lot. There was just a Hollywood Climate Summit. I know BAFTA's doing some stuff to really...
Enemies in this. We're all friends, because having a stable climate is a human right, right? It's a human right. So we're all friends.
And that's where it's great to bring these examples forward so people can keep learning and finding ways to connect with them and grow from there, because they would love to have you at some of their meetings and to connect with them, and they learn and you learn and we all move forward together. So that is one of the things that is really critical in this. Now, Saren, we discussed a little about simplifying versus oversimplifying. And that is, there's a nuance there, but you in the policy side have seen some more challenges than I would say me communicating with the general public or a viewer. So in the policy side, when things are being written around this, you've run into some of that. So do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I love the topic of complexity versus simplification. So maybe just coming, because we were actually disagreeing on that, coming back a little bit early on, one need to understand that it's quite counterintuitive for a scientist to actually communicate in a very simple manner a very complex phenomena. And they spend years and years studying complexity, and suddenly they're in front of people that ask them to summarize it in 1 minute using very simple words. And not only is it a frustration, because I don't think that the reason why it's difficult is because they're frustrated. It's just because oversimplification or simplification can lead to shortcuts. And these shortcuts leads to mistrust, because when you simplify too much, then you can hear someone during winter, because it's very cold, saying, you see, they're saying that the planet is burning, but it's been cold for 4 months. Well, it is complex. And if we oversimplify, then these shortcuts can lead to this mistrust. So we
But
understand.
you do think there's a simplification
Yes.
in there, though, correct?
No, yes, of course. That being said, of course, we realize that the complexity should not be at the heart of the debate. That's one thing. And that more than simplification is how do we shape that narrative for it to be understandable? So is it a question of wording? Is it a question of format as well? Is it the question also of the people that are delivering that message? As you said, there are many ways, I would say, key transmitters of that knowledge, which we need to represent and to be represented in that dialogue, and that I believe is very important in the policy debate. Then it's again another kind of narrative, another kind of wording, another kind of dynamic among the people that work together, and when a policy is driven by science, we have the, I would say, the responsibility to keep the science, but shape it again in a way where it's going to be understandable on a policy base. And it's a very difficult exercise because we write publications, scientific publications, they're long, they're complex. And when we try and transform that in a policy brief, the wording is completely different because the objective and the target audience and the user is going to be completely different. And for that, we mentioned it, I think, a bit earlier, but media training is an excellent tool. But again, and I will finish with that, I'm sorry if I'm being a bit long here. Media training is for the people and the researcher, and we have an excellent example here, that are willing to take that step. But he, as an individual researcher talking about this topic, can be confronted to controversy, can be confronted to difficulties in advancing in his career, because when he does that, he's not publishing. So we have existing tools to support research in order to come out of their labs and have this conversation with you. But not all of them are yet willing to do so, I would say.
Our online friends have spent a lot of time in that intersection of science and policy too. So if you have something to add, you are most welcome to jump in.
Yeah, maybe I'll come in briefly. It's just got me thinking to something we've been working on very recently with heat and the World Cup, which is going on as we speak. And, you know, for us, we're looking more and more at timing and how we use trusted voices, and also how we help other trusted voices bring in a bit of a climate message. So with the heat and World Cup example, we took data that was available from a number of organizations, WWA, Climate Central. There was a number of studies that came out a few weeks ago, which were really helpful for us because we were already working with those organizations a bit and with others in the UN system to put together a bit of like a briefing pack, both written briefings for sports presenters, pundits, and sports journalists, but also to provide some oral briefings to kind of connect that data that is so helpful with a bit of the kind of climate messaging and policy background to give them narratives that they could use to talk about the heat impacts on players and fans and the connection to climate change in ways that are really easy to insert. And yeah, we've seen some great coverage so far, and we're continuing this work throughout the World Cup. But this has been a new area for us, and there was so much interest in the kind of online briefings that we did. It really showed that in this world of sports journalists and sports presenters that we have never engaged before, there is a lot of interest in actually bringing that climate context, and that just for us means there's only more work to be done there. So yeah,
so
a little nugget
for the media in this room. Where can they find those resources?
They can get in touch with press@unfcc.int, and we can share that with them.
Okay, so everyone has access to those now. All right, Manuel, I'm going to have you, if you wanted to jump in on that. Give me a
Yeah,
number
sure.
you did.
Yeah, many things. Also, I do want to make this have fun. So the last interventions, it has been mostly focused on two topics: simplification, and also Lana spoke about these hits. No, so let me make a reflection on that, because every time we are reading that we are beating all the hit records, no, and seems like a competition. Every year we are more and more and more. And look, I'm not sure if that is creating more level of awareness and conscious on the problem that we have in our hands. So for me, it is not an issue or to simplify or not to simplify, or how much we are oversimplifying. I think that we have to switch on the narrative in some elements. First, we need to move from crisis to solutions. That is for me important. Look, people will never take action for being more aware of knowing what is the problem, if it is not by solutions. The crisis in the current times, in which everybody is suffering of a lot of problem challenges, facing challenges, economic employment challenges, the people really don't want to have more crisis announcement. The people is looking more for solutions. And that is so important. That moves me to a second point, that it is science must be more able to communicate consequences. Again, let me go back into El Nino. Probably I am raising El Nino a lot because I am from Peru, and you know how much that it is an event happening in Peruvian and Ecuador coast, it could hit us. So when it is about El Nino, it is to describe the consequences, and mostly the social and economic consequences. Because when it is about El Nino, it is how much fisheries could lose resources. It is about native crops in the Andes. It is about water scarcity. It is about glacier melting. It is about flood for sure that could destroy the infrastructure. So to speak about consequences, it is better than just to speak about facts and science and data. And that is also a switch that I do suggest it must be more adopted. Then it is about vulnerability. No, because we know in the climate debate how much adaptation it is like the orphan cousin of the climate debate, because people is not really fully aware of how much the level of vulnerability has been increased because of the climate extreme event. So that is something that I hope also it could be switched. And by the end, let me finish with this. When I was minister, it was in 2011, we were facing a threat of El Nino. Something that we did, it was let's communicate El Nino in a way in which it could be understandable for people. And now the level of awareness of El Nino, it's amazing in many countries, even in Peru. But you know that something that unfortunately I was not able to conclude, it is to bring meteorological, how can I say, not information, meteorological understanding into schools. Into schools, we have to bring into school how to understand the climate system, how to understand the system, no? And I am pretty sure that we would be more able to make people to be better trained, more skillful to understand and to face the challenges of the planet. We did the pilot, but it was not possible because of time constraints to finish that. But I will insist on that. Let's bring all of these climate systems into schools to make it more understandable.
There's a key point there too, is connecting it to things that people already care about, things that are already in their daily lives, and helping people understand those. So with that, we are running short on time, and I'm going to open this up to any questions that we have. Patrick, do we have any online? I don't want to forget online people. Okay.
Just maybe to complement the session we had this morning, I'm curious about hearing about all of you, what you think about the consequences of accessing information through commercial AIs when it comes to scientific information.
Yeah, so AI, yeah, it's another issue, but I think it's all part of the problem. Again, I want to go back to education. So the problem now that we see is that the students, even the good students that we have at the university, they cannot make the difference on what is a good news, a fake news, because in the social media everything is flat. Everything you have, you don't have the same relief, the same sharpness that you have in a newspaper or in a journal at the television, where the first news is the most important, and you have the second, the third, then you have the gossip, but everything has the place. Here you can have the American president speaking and cut picture, oh yeah, that's at the same level, and then something else that is very important, like the IPCC, and at the same level of Donald Trump or the cuts. I mean, and then people say, okay, this is the level. There is only one level, it's flat. And the AI entering this game also this way. So it's in the same level. It's flattening everything. So if we don't go back to the education and the students and the young crowd and the education that continue through life cannot recognize what is a real news from something that is AI generated. And I think there is the challenge. It's back to education. And yes, Manuel was saying that we have to teach people the climate science. I say yes, but we have to go back to one fundamental discipline that is philosophy. People have to learn to think. And if they learn to think, they will learn all the other things, including climate science. Yeah.
So I do want to make a plug here for Brigitte. She mentioned earlier the Earth Info Hub that she is building. And this is a topic that is front of mind. So people continue to have thoughts from the crowd too in this. Please bring them to Brigitte or to myself, and I will make sure she gets them. So we are down to 3 minutes. Do we have any other questions?
One thought on AI is that we keep hearing AI, revolution of AI, but again, one needs to understand that it's only a tool. And it's the way we're going to use that tool and way we're going to shape that tool. And coming back to one of your introductory remarks, I think that one of the main challenges that we have to face and that universities are now understanding and wanting to take the responsibility of that is actually to create a switch or a change of narrative and go from a reactive model where it seems that we're just chasing misinformation and trying to react to that misinformation saying, hey, no, it's not that, to actually how do we take the control of that information. And for that, of course, we need to collaborate with the communicators that you are. But I really think that AI can be helpful for that. But again, as a tool.
Thank you. And so with our 2 minutes, what I'm going to do is go to each of you. So this will be quick. Again, big challenges in the world. We've covered that. But big challenges give us opportunities. Where do you see an opportunity going forward?
Again, it's my first time here, so I'm discovering a world of opportunities. I think that we have the opportunity of creating a continuum in the information from where it's produced to the way that it's transmitted.
Yes, networking is fundamental. I think that what we are doing here by connecting people, diverse people that come from diverse background is really the key. And we should connect even more, as I say again, with the school and with the university, with the teachers, because the future of our planet is going to be played there. And philosophy again.
Ayana.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. It has to be a sort of coalition effort from all of us, and there's so much opportunity there to work more closely together, to build new networks. So yeah, I hope this is just the start of us getting more involved with the work of all of you there.
Emmanuel.
The opportunity it is in connecting, as it has just been said. And in that sense, these synergies in between addressing the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, and the land crisis, it could be a great opportunity because it could give us a more comprehensive and systemic approach to the problem. So to connect the dots, it's so important, and not to have silos of science giving us different approaches because of different bodies.
So I love that everyone came back to people. People really are a pathway going forward. So we can have the greatest science in the world, but we need to get it to the right people in the right ways. And it's up to us to keep these connections going forward. I mean, we're super grateful to the sponsors and the organizers, but in between this, we can do this. People's contact information is available. All the names are out here. So it's really up to us to keep that going. So that's my challenge to all of you. Thanks for joining us. And I think right now we have, is it a coffee break? Okay, we have a coffee break. So we'll see you all in 15 minutes. Oh, and there's going to be some pictures outside here too for the weather presenters.